week, whether you started this week or next week. So we are recording it, and then I will share this on our consortium group, so that you get to see a little bit of what Off2class does, and that what they could offer. Chris contacted me last year, I believe, and we spoke back and forth, and we exchanged emails. We looked at their website, and we decided to give it a try, partly because of the textbook issues and the textbooks delivery issues, and also textbooks being coming up with new editions all the time, and students have to spend a lot of money. And sometimes we cannot go through whole books in one semester. So we wanted to come up with something, more economical, and also, more technological, because students have to adapt to be able to use technologies. So we gave it a go, and then we tried it this summer. So far, so good. Our teachers really like it. Also, we have all kinds of teachers, as everybody does. Some teachers that take care than the others, and we made sure, and Chris did a really good job of training everybody. So now I have 6 part-timers, and they're all on board, and they come, in different techie or savviness of the technology, but everybody finds it quite easy to use. And also, these guys are their tech support is amazing. Chris, I don't know when you sleep, but you're pretty much on call all the time. So our instructors actually contacted you guys on the little bubble thing, the help, and they got responses right away. So they could resolve the issues, whatever that they may have been, right away. So that makes really easier for us to, less afraid to use. So yeah, so you get to see a little bit of what it does.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yuri. That's a great introduction. So my name is Chris, and I'm joined with Dimitri and Kate, and we're from Off2class. We are a toolkit for ESL program delivery. We work with a lot of higher education institutions, and Yuri's team at Bakersfield is one of our first big partners in California, so it's very exciting for us. When myself and Yuri first started chatting, I think it was about January, February, perhaps last year's NAFSA, was really around this idea of decreasing enrollments, a refocusing on shorter term programs, and then some international students sadly having issues with visas and coming stateside, and like that era of unpredictability of knowing when students are coming that I think we're all experiencing, and that not necessarily mapping to the traditional bookstore, campus bookstore model, where obviously the bookstore is not super happy to keep large quantities of stock for relatively small numbers or for fluid enrollments. So the idea of the IEP head being completely in control of the curriculum delivery, and if you've got a new student who you find out on Friday showing up on Monday, you can just set up an account for them. It's a couple clicks versus this kind of logistical process of physical course book delivery. And then on the other hand, I think a lot of us are experiencing that students are wanting digital, and a lot of our classrooms are equipped with projectors and whiteboards, and faculty are left, in Yuri's case, part-time faculty are left with a lot of times having to come up with that digital content on their own. And of course, they're not necessarily paid for that work. And so it's nice to offer some baseline of content that they can use to deliver digital lessons. And finally, the last point that I remember from our discussions with Yuri, and one of the themes at NAFSA this year, was this idea of smaller class sizes, or smaller enrollment sizes means a lot more mixed groups, and the CEA is not crazy about that, obviously. So this idea of being able to offer individualized attention, individualized support, even if your group isn't so homogenous, if you've got, some intermediate learners, some more beginner learners in the same grouping, um, that brings us to, this is the off-class placement test. And one of the nice ways we've been using this with mixed groups is that if you assign this to students on the way in, it produces a diagnostic, and we know a lot of teams already have a great placement test that you're currently using. But the nice thing about ours, the off-to-class placement test, is it does identify lessons that are specific to the student. And so even in a mixed group setting, you can provide these individual lessons at kind of the individual level and really support individual gaps and needs. And then you can include that with our more traditional content, which is very much maps to a course book. So multi-skill lessons, sequential, one lesson builds after another. Every 4 lessons is organized in a module with a common theme. So this module is about describing your neighborhood and town. Some explicit grammar is introduced, but then all of that is reinforced around functional language, a listening activity, a reading activity. So really kind of that course book approach that we're all really used to, it starts to mimic that. Finally, the last point I wanted to hit was that, and Yuri did a good job of explaining that her faculty include people that are very tech savvy and people that are not very tech savvy. That is one of the nice things about Off to Class. It is designed for faculty that have never taught using a digital platform before. And part of the reason we're able to accommodate teams like that is because the platform itself is relatively intuitive. So right now, here's an example of a lesson. If my students were logged into their own devices, they could follow on sequentially. But if we don't want to get that tech savvy, it could be as simple as projecting this in front of the classroom on a TV screen, whiteboard, whatever you have in the classroom. And the only step the teacher has to really take to get going is to hide their teacher notes so that so the students aren't seeing the teacher notes. And the teachers can actually run those teacher notes off a secondary device if they want to get very fancy. But again, if technology kind of setup and clumsiness is a concern, effectively launching a lesson and hiding the teacher notes is all I need to do to get set up. But that's just to get into the lesson and run the lesson. So there's a very low technology threshold to just operate. But as the teachers become more comfortable, there is a host of different bells and whistles they can use to really bring the lessons alive. So maybe day one, week one, when, intake day, when things are a bit fluid and chaotic, the first goal is just to have the teachers very comfortable with launching a lesson. But after that gets, everybody's comfortable, then they can start discovering different things on the platform to really spice up the lessons and bring them alive. And because it's a teacher-led platform, we've spent quite a lot of time putting different tools in that the teachers can use to run things like a Google Translate into a student's L1, an image search, dictionary definition. Each lesson comes with a whiteboard where the students can add different pieces of where the teachers can add different pieces of content that they like to pair with the lessons. And of course, each of these lessons comes with homework. So there's an asynchronous self-study side to each lesson so that after the lesson, the teachers can automatically send the homework to the enrolled students. So that's really what I wanted to focus on today with Yuri. It was just give a really brief overview of how we're working together, how we kind of are easy to use depending on what the level of technological kind of capacity is with your faculty. We don't yet have a customer story up on our website about CSUB, but we would love to one day, of course. Right now, for an IEP reference, we've got Manhattan College. That was a little bit different than CSUB in that they were a very high volume program this summer. About 2,000 students came all at once. So this can give you an idea about, like, for lack of better words, how we scale when it's a very big program. But likewise, when it's a much smaller program like at CSUB, we're just as comfortable with a small team as we are with a big team. And this is a fun story. When you go to off2class.com and you go to customer stories, I believe it's the second one in the queue. And this is a fun story also just from the perspective of understanding how an IEP with decreased enrollments took on a very large scale, call it short-term program. And what I'll just leave with is that we would love, oh, sorry. That we'd love to be in conversations with all or any of you. The contact details here are for Dimitri. He leads all our higher education partnerships, and he's with us here today. Very responsive, and every institution is different. So we'd love to just show you around and answer your questions directly. You can email Dimitri or give him a phone call, and we can go from there.